you're not going to get extra credit for sticking to the wrong budget. There's no gold star for suffering through a plan that doesn't fit your life anymore. In fact, the longer you do it, the more it ruins your motivation to budget at all. Welcome to the Rich and Regular podcast, where we explore life at the intersection of money. I'm Kirsten.
And I'm Julian. And today we're talking about budgeting and giving you the only advice that matters.
Amen.
The only advice. Very, very bold claim.
But it's not one thing.
I'm going to get back to that, though. It's a bold claim, and I did that on purpose. But first, I want to give a shout out to a new listener, Don Pug. Don Pug. I'm reading that like Don Pug, but it could be Don Pugh. I don't know. DONPUG, who's catching up and left a comment on our episode about overspending on youth sports. The comment was, Spotify recommended your podcast. It's a great podcast. I believe the pay-to-play system in sports is the leading cause of the decline in Black children's sports participation. It is crazy how soccer leagues are charging $3,000 a season.
Listen.
Now, I don't know how long a season is, and I don't know what is included in the season. That better don't ask me for nothing. That better come
jerseys,
with
gear,
equipment,
coach stipend,
a massage on a regular basis. That's crazy.
No, I mean, it's a valid point, and I think it's a great comment to start this episode on budgeting advice and how to actually have the money for the things that you want to buy.
Yeah. God bless any parents that are out there paying $3,000 for soccer lessons. All right. So I want to get back to the little kind of remark that I made as we were opening up this, because I want to talk about why we are talking about this and the way that we're talking about it. And so I want to go back to when we were writing Cashing Out. And I remember there was a lot to remember going through that process. We were writing that through COVID. It was a really, really crazy time.
It was back in 2020.
No, are you crazy? Nothing like this. I mean, we can go outside and meet.
Oh, no, I mean, just in terms of the craziness.
Yeah, there was a
brief period where we couldn't go outside.
There was a sense of crazy. There was a sense of crazy in the air for sure. But what I remember was when we submitted the manuscript and we'd written everything and we'd submitted it and we were just about ready to go. And I remember Nina, one of the editors at Penguin Random House, was pushing back a little bit, rightfully so, not in a bad way. And she was saying, I want you to be more prescriptive, was the word she was using. Mm-hmm. And she was basically telling us that there were instances throughout the book where we were letting people off the hook. And I'm using the language she was using, right? We're basically giving them wiggle room to essentially think on their own. And I was like, yeah, that's exactly, that is kind of the point.
People hate that though.
It's a fascinating idea, right? So her argument was that we need to be really, really specific. Now, those of us who are personal finance educators or financial educators, we understand exactly what she's saying. It took me a minute to get there to kind of understand editor talk. But what she was really suggesting was that people want to know exactly what to do, what to buy, what not to buy, what is good, what is bad. We needed to speak in super restrictive, absolute language, completely inflexible. We call that a hot take. Right? People who have a hot take and say, I will never, you should never, I will always, those kinds of language. You're like, whoa, I'm a realist. I kind of understand that I want to leave a little bit of wiggle room there. And so that was her point. Now, the reason why I bring that up is because when you think about the way budgeting is taught and discussed, and certainly a lot of the more popular hot takes or just takes in general, a lot of them do exactly what our editor was suggesting. And so there is some truth and some validity to the fact that people kind of like that, but I don't know that it works, right? Because on one end, we can talk about why people may have a preference for that, because there is a general belief that people can't think for themselves. But then there's certainly something to be said for the fact that people are still struggling and also hate this process, and it does not always lead to results. And in many cases, it leads to people falling off the wagon and completely reverting back to
And shame.
behaviors that they were trying to escape, right? And
Don't
so
forget the shame.
the shame and all of those things, right? Because you have told yourself that this is what my budget is, and anything outside of that is seen as failure. I have
Mhm.
not done my part, or my partner, my husband, my wife has not done their part. And I'm bringing this up because I feel like budgeting advice for the most part does not account for life, like the instability of life, the unpredictability of life, right? Like they assume that your income is consistent and
Mhm.
predictable, that you are always going to be employed at this rate or at a higher earning clip for X amount of time, that your goals are fixed, right? That
Mhm.
whatever you started with, that's still going to be relevant to you after 5 years or 10 years. And that's just not realistic. I think we should be thinking about budgeting more like a tool belt, right? It's something that can be adjusted depending on how bloated you're feeling that day. But there's also just little things in there, right? Like it's serving an overall purpose, but there are little things that you can employ at various periods of time to solve the problem that whatever life has thrown at you requires, versus something that is a cage or that's like one size fit all situation and everyone needs to adjust their life to
To
what
fit in the
this
cage.
belt is, or like
Yeah.
what this cage is. Like that to me is the larger issue that we don't talk enough about it. And so we're going to talk about it today.
You're making me think back to the book writing process, and the way that we solved it was with the rules and the rituals.
Correct.
There are absolutely hills that we're willing to die on because they're just the facts of our economic system. Things like don't forget to calculate inflation. That's something that is just going to be a fact. So we had rules, but then we also had these rituals, which were more flexible, more take it or leave it, more it depends,
Yeah.
right? Because that's what we believe. We believe that the answer to almost every single financial question should start with it depends,
Hmm.
because it usually does. It depends on your situation, it depends on your income, it depends on your cash cushion. All of these things matter. But when it comes to budgets, you're absolutely right. We treat them like they are wedding vows, like till death do us part, like the budget is the law.
Hmm.
And your life changes too much for that. Like at some point, given all this volatility, given all this age and wisdom and responsibility, your life's going to change. And so the goal for this episode is really just to give you permission and a plan to throw out the idea of a forever budget and actually use your budget in a seasonal, situational way to do exactly what you said, solve the problems that you're facing in your life right now.
Yeah.
All right, so let's just jump right in. The first piece of outdated advice is to make a budget and to stick to it no matter what. Like, no matter what. And I just think that that advice should be more like identify your seasonal spending patterns and then plan for them. The reason the old advice fails is because it assumes that every month's expenses and priorities are the exact same. The reality is there are high spend months, there are low spend months that repeat every single year. And life just comes in seasons. There's tax season, there's travel season, back to school season, holiday season, and each one of those has a different demand on your money. And you have to account for that. If you treat them all the same, then the high months become emergencies instead of just patterns that you can prepare for.
Yeah.
And that disrupts your nervous system. That changes the way that you think about money. That changes the gratitude that you have for the money that's coming in. And it changes the way that you approach that spending. It's also realizing that sometimes you're not always spending more as much as you're spending earlier. And we talked about this a little bit in the grocery store episode, where when you're buying in bulk, it's not that you're spending more money, you're just spending in advance. But even outside of groceries, there are some things that require payment before you actually consume or benefit from the thing. You have to account for that. You would have spent that money anyway, but sometimes you just have to pay in advance, and that has to be accounted for.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. One of the other things I think shame does is it really blocks your ability to actually learn and assess from the situation that you're actually dealing with. And so, to your point, one of the things that I think really gets overlooked is the role that seasons play. And that doesn't always mean necessarily spring, summer, winter, and fall. Sometimes it could be back to school season or holiday season or, summer season, like, but not necessarily around a weather situation, but just like the flood of things that may be happening depending on where you are that are related to that. But there are times also when the weather does also impact you're spending, right? It's just a
Yes.
natural part of life on earth. So there will be weather related spikes. And, we can talk about climate change and those things all the time. But yes, I think generally speaking, everybody knows that their electricity bill is going to be higher in the summer, assuming you live in a climate where it's going to be significantly warmer. But little things like that can truly affect the way that you manage your budget. And I think we can wrap our head around how to make those kinds of adjustments, but we don't always apply that kind of thinking to other things. You mentioned a number of things that are requiring like upfront payments. Summer camps are a great example of that. Those charges, you normally handle those things, but those charges actually hit in the spring, if I'm not mistaken,
Yeah,
right?
well,
Like,
it depends
because,
on where you live. It could be January. Like if
well,
camps fill up quickly, you're enrolling your child in January and paying either a deposit or a partial payment for something they're not going to use until June.
right,
And then the rest of that money is due.
right.
You're absolutely right. And I think this is important because it's so easy for us to blame or attribute ups and downs to different people or a lack of discipline. But these are scenarios where that is not the case. This
Yeah.
is not because of a lack of discipline. This is just because that's how it is.
Yeah, for sure. So what can we do about it? I think this is where you really need to put on your business hat. I understand that not everyone has that, but if you are a business owner or if you are someone who pays attention to the way that businesses are managed, you understand the importance of managing cash flow and how that's different from, let's say, managing your income statement. Your income statement is really going to look at the year over year. Like, this is how much money came in. These are all of the expenses and how they're organized. And at the end, what we have is profit. A lot of people think they're kind of doing that on a month to month basis, but that's really cash flow management, what you're
Mhm.
doing, right? Like, you call it your income because what you earn from your job is your income. But what you're really doing is looking at your net pay, your take home pay, which for a lot of people is biweekly. And then you're looking at what that looks like on a month to month basis, which is good, right? There are certainly benefits to managing your money in that way, but it kind of hides anything that might be seasonal, right? So you
Mhm.
have to kind of zoom out a little bit and stop looking at things month to month and start looking at things on a quarterly basis. Businesses do this a lot. And what that does is it allows you to see different kinds of patterns, right? So you can see for this 3 month period or for this 6 month period, which again may not necessarily align with actual seasons. But when you start to look at it from a different perspective, you might be able to see for this 4 month period, I am consistently year over year over budget.
Mhm.
And for these other 4 to 5 months or these 2 months, I'm really under budget. So from there, you can start to say, well, all right, now you can look at it on an annual basis, start doing some simple addition and subtraction and say, do these surpluses in these months make up for these shortcomings in these other months? And if they don't, that means you do actually have a overspending problem or some kind of issue, but it at least narrows down when it's occurring. And then from there, you can start solving for what those issues are. And I think that's a much more strategic way of actually looking at your spending plan or your budget, whatever you want to call it, because it allows you to actually assess where the issues and therefore where the opportunities might actually be. Because you may have a tendency, let's say, to just focus on your variable expenses, but you're really blocking out or assuming that there's nothing to be done with any of these fixed expenses. A lot of this could be accomplished with a simple refinance of your mortgage, or it could be accomplished if you decided to opt away from a month to month subscription service for a handful of them and opt for the annual plan, and to make those adjustments during those surplus periods because you actually have the extra cash that you can do it. And so little things like that, could really, really be the big difference maker as opposed to what a lot of people do, which is they just start hunkering down and trimming the budget and eating differently. And they're making themselves miserable when there's really a couple of tweaks that they could be doing from a seasonal basis. This is making me think of our neighbors. I'm not trying to put their business out there. And I don't even remember the number, but they said something to the effect of their budget. I think it was like their air conditioning bill was something like $500. And they live just a couple of houses down from us. Now, we started doing the math. It was like, all right, hold on. There's one other person in the house. That person is a teenager. Like, they're not home like that. And I was like, I've never seen a $400 air conditioning bill. So for them to have seen 500, and I was talking to them like, hey, do you do this? And he was like, no, we leave it at 72, and all the little hacks that a lot of people have been trained to do. And I walked away from that conversation because I kept probing and I realized, honestly, it could just be that he does not have a smart thermostat.
Yeah.
We have had a smart thermostat for years, and I'm not bragging. I'm just saying I have not had that issue in a really, really long time. Like I remember the first time I had a really crazy spike, and that had to be over 10 years ago. And that's when I
Mhm.
said, you know what, I'm done with that. Let me go ahead and I'm be a bit more willing to spend, which at the time would have been $150 or something like that for a smart Wi-Fi enabled thermostat. And now the Nest Google Home, I'm pretty sure there are others on the market, but they're really, really good. And they like assess when the actual rates are higher, like peak periods, and then they, bring it down. They also can detect motion on certain floors. And so if you're not there, it adjusts because nobody's there. And so it really, really does make a big difference. And so all of that to say, look at your spending on a quarterly basis. It will help you identify trends that you may not be able to identify on a month to month basis and let that guide what your next steps should be versus making yourself miserable and making cuts in areas to make up for something that could be a much simpler fix.
Yeah. And that's the perfect example for the next tip, which is basically challenging the outdated advice that your budget is simply just dividing up your paycheck.
Yeah.
That is such an elementary way of looking at it. The way that we should be thinking about it is through the lens of consumption. Your budget should track everything that you can use, not just money. I think a lot of people believe that budgeting happens in two places: before the month starts when you're making the plan, and then once the month ends when you see how you did. It's a very, like, to your point, caged in,
Yeah.
boxed in, time constrained exercise. But the real magic of budgeting is right there in the middle when you're managing your consumption in real time and knowing what levers you can pull other than money.
Yeah.
So air conditioning is a perfect example. It's not about going without, it's about making non-cash choices a legit part of your financial strategy, not this last resort that you do because now you need to find $300 or now you got a credit card bill that you need to pay off. And when I say non-cash choices, I'm talking about ways for you to get what you need without spending new money. So this is using your time, your skills, your creativity, or what you already own to still get what you need.
Yeah.
That could be doing the work yourself. That could be borrowing or renting instead of buying. It could be trading services or paying with points or credit card cash back that you've already earned. But it even includes community resources like buy nothing groups or other people's air conditioning. Like, it matters because if you only track the cash transactions, you're going to miss all of the ways that you could meet a need without opening your wallet. There are days where our Nest has turned down the air and it's a little warm outside. And I have two choices. I can go turn the air up and, get charged for that. And I'm not saying I'm super frugal, that I'm not going to use the air conditioning, but most days I will try to get creative. I will go somewhere else, work. I will open up a window. I will turn on a fan. I will move to another part of the house. Like, it is not a default reaction for
Yeah.
me to just consume more air just because ours has cut off. And it has saved us hundreds of dollars this summer. Now, I am not a Georgia Power apologist for anybody in Georgia who is struggling with Georgia Power transactions. There is an election in a couple of weeks, so please go vote so that we can change our leadership there. But it is about making a conscious choice of when and where to use things or to increase my consumption, because I know on the back end that there is a charge for that. There's a cost to that.
Yeah. One of the silver linings to tough times and tough economic times is that it does force people to get a little bit more creative. For those of us who aren't necessarily forced to, but do have the option, I think this is one of those times where you really want to tap into that sense of curiosity or creativity that's in you. I know I had a similar experience. It must have been last year for the first time when we got a note from our HOA around pressure washing. And one year we did it and it was like $50 or something like that to get it done. I think the way it works is normally there's one contractor who'll come through and they'll strike an agreement with someone and then they'll say, hey, I'll give you a discount if I can just save a bunch of time while I'm here, and I'll just bang out the entire neighborhood. But this year, or maybe it was like early last year or something like that, they did it again. And I was like, all right, yeah, let's run that back. I mean, that was great. Took us a couple of minutes. But instead, I mean, I want to say the price was almost like 3 times what it
Oh, it's
was
more
the
than that.
year
It was like
before.
4 or 5
It was
times.
something ridiculous. And I was like, nah, nah. I was like, that don't seem right. And I had to go back. I was like, I don't think we paid that much, because it went from being a no-brainer to, well, how much do you value your time? It was one of those situations. And I was like, yeah, no, I'd rather, you know what, I'm going to learn about pressure washing today. And so I did that because we have a pressure washer. It's not a commercial pressure washer. It took me a little bit longer, but I actually found that experience to be therapeutic. Like I really enjoyed it. I was outside. I was learning something. I, figured out my own little technique. I had my earbuds in and it was a really cool experience. And I'm in a similar boat now. We just got a little note about our garage door, as they're talking about curb appeal and little things like that just need to be touched up. And I was like, oh yeah, because I saw somebody doing that and I
Mhm.
wanted to do it, but I didn't, it was not top of my list. And now I was like, you know what? Let me just see how much this costs because like we're actually pretty busy. And I was like, nah, we're not doing that. So looks like I'm going to Home Depot and I'm going to learn something else. But for me, I have actually really grown to appreciate those things. For me, like honestly, these were not things that I grew up learning how to do. We weren't homeowners when I was a kid. So it's not like my mom or my dad or an uncle or somebody was teaching me how to do these things. And so I'm learning a lot of these things in my mid 40s and I've actually enjoyed it bit by bit. I'm not saying you got to turn into, Mr. Home Improvement, but there's certainly value sometimes and certainly a lot of fulfillment. I remember when I fixed the, what was it? Oh man, what do you call that thing? In the kitchen with the food thing,
The disposal?
the disposal. You remember when I fixed the disposal? I was in there with all kinds of tools, and I was like, I don't know how to do this, but I found it. I did that. I fixed the garbage can. Like
Yeah.
I never thought I would be that guy. You know what I mean?
Listen,
But like I've actually really come to like I get it now.
I do.
I
I
get it.
do.
I low key really appreciate the process because it's just a problem to solve. And
It
again, we have the
is.
benefit of the time and the resources. So it's like, you know what? That's what this weekend's going to be about. I got to figure out how to do this thing.
It is. And I've come to realize and accept that midlife is really just about maintenance.
For sure.
You work hard, you acquire all of these assets in your early life. And then middle life is really just about taking care of them,
For
whether it
sure.
is your body, your home, your relationships, your spirituality, your mental health. All of this stuff requires maintenance. And you got to learn how to love that. You got to learn how to feel gratitude for that opportunity to maintain something that you worked for.
Yeah.
And we talked a little bit about this mindset in our episode about underconsumption. It was episode 189, and just making a conscious choice to use less or use more of what you already own. But it extends so many places. And I think people stop short of the budget. They immediately want to go to just where it's already categorized or at the transaction level. And you gotta look at you.
Well, there's,
You gotta say, do I need as much wine this month? Do I need to buy another thing this month? Is there something I can return? Is there something that I can do around the house to redirect whatever energy that I'm using to consume to actually maintain and zhuzh up what I already got?
yeah, there's the old saying, and I'm probably going to butcher it, but it's something like, if you only have a hammer, then everything looks like a nail.
That's it.
Okay. Well, then I think that's what a lot of people are kind of going through. Like we talk about budgets and budget shortfalls, but we never, or I should say rarely, look at the issues that we are dealing with as a skill deficiency around home
Mm.
maintenance, right? There's a direct
Mm.
connection between your ability to assess, understand what these things are, what an actual prevention plan looks like, and the downstream effect that that has on your budget. We just call them the unexpected things that happen. But I can assure you there are tons of people who can say, well, yes, if you aren't properly maintaining these things. Last thing I'll say on this is shout out to Rob. I can't remember his last name, but I remember a couple years ago, he was telling me and he was bragging about it. And I thought it was weird. Like, again, growth, growth. He was bragging about how it took him 20 minutes after watching the YouTube video, how he fixed his dryer. And my first thought was like, man, you crazy. Like dryers ain't nothing but $200. And there's no way I would be sitting there trying to deal with no electrical work. And he was like, nah, man, I went, did some research, found out it was just this thing. I unscrewed it, reattached it, cost me $7. And I was like, I guess you're proud of
It's
that.
worth
I
totally
totally get it now, though.
Yeah,
I totally get it now.
because
So shout
dryers
out
ain't
to Rob.
$200 no more either.
Shout out to Rob and shout out to The Sopranos. If there's any Soprano fans out there, there was a recent episode where the FBI was trying to tap Sony Soprano's basement. And basically they saw when they were videotaping but down there that his water heater was about to bust. And they were basically trying to find a way to use that to their advantage. Meanwhile, I'm like, how do they know the water heater was about to bust? Because I didn't even know. I was like, let me go downstairs and make sure I don't see. I literally had to rewind and watch that scene a couple times. I was like, because I don't want that to happen to me. Water heater bust, this whole thing's flooded out.
Oh, yeah.
That's where we record. So it's definitely something to pay attention to.
I love that you said a recent episode. Like Sopranos ain't been made for
It's
20
recent
years.
to me. Ain't no
And that's
different than
another
a car.
example.
Ain't
We
no
could
different
go
than a
see a
used
movie,
car.
but he'd
Yeah, what am
rather
I gonna
watch
see in the movie for when I ain't seen The
he'd rather
Sopranos
watch
yet?
The Sopranos. Ain't been on a date in 13 months.
Shit. Netflix is a date. Same thing.
It is.
And the floors ain't sticky at home. All right. Next kind of budget myth that I really want to bust is these ideas of standard formulas, like being the best formula out there. Again, this one size fit all. One of the more popular ones is the 50-30-20 budget. And I get it. There are tons of people out there who swear by it. It works for them. That does not mean it is a standard for everyone.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And it's something that I really want us to just think a little bit differently about. And you hit the nail on the head earlier when you talked about give people permission. That does not necessarily mean that we are inviting you to disregard the importance of discipline, but you don't have to be so restrictive when it comes to a lot of these formulas. My first thought goes to when I was a real estate investor and you would hear all these rules of thumb. And it's like, dude, I don't think people actually understand what it means for a rule of thumb. It is a guide. It is something that you can look at to compare your current situation to, but it doesn't mean you should absolutely eliminate or disregard or avoid something if it does not perfectly comply with a rule of thumb.
Especially since the rules of thumb were created based on a certain population's experience with money. Everybody didn't have access to the same tools, assets, or even income. We still don't at the same time. So when you think about rules of thumb that have existed for a long time, they're typically from a white male, high earning, breadwinning perspective.
Mhm.
And it's like, yeah, that might work because you don't have certain expenses in that category. That's not to say that it's bad advice, but it does say that when you are trying to apply it to someone who might have a medical issue or someone who might have student loans or live in a high cost of living area, those rules are not going to be the same.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think the better way of thinking about these rules of thumb is to kind of add some caveats to it, right? I think the best budget for anyone is going to be the one that works for them in the moment that they are in, right? Like whatever you need then. And this is one of the other reasons I don't ever, while I am not a huge fan, but I don't ever go so far as to just completely crap on Dave Ramsey because he's another one that's full of these really hot takes. But there are millions of people who actually can attribute their success to his hot takes. So I'm far more interested in the result and the outcomes. And however you get there is perfectly fine with me. If you got there through this lane, congratulations. If you got there doing the exact opposite, congratulations. Like, I don't really care. If you prefer shame, if that's who you are, because there are some people who are like that, you find that a lot in like weight loss communities as well. Like they need that like true person, that authoritarian figure to kind of tell them what to do, make them feel bad about themselves because they can churn that shame into an outcome that they were looking
burns
for.
clean for them.
Congratulations. But that's obviously not for everyone and it offends other people. But both exist for a reason. So to me, the best budget, the best approach is the one that works for you for the moment in life that you are in. Okay. And I think for no other reason than because life happens. You've probably said this a million times, on the podcast that life be life. But I want to get a little bit more specific around moments where you may be so focused on applying a particular budget, but then realizing that your life just does not comply with these kinds of situations. So there's just a couple of things in case anyone is not clear. Having a child is completely going to distort the way that you look at your budget. And I get it. I used to be arrogant too.
Well, you simply save for it.
I used to
coupons.
I used to be arrogant too. And that does not mean that my comment or my remark is that I am somehow by default less disciplined than you. I'm telling you right now, when you have a child, your And if you love that child, I can assure you, you will disregard your budget to ensure your child is safe and
Your
well.
child will disregard your
Your
budget.
child is certainly going to disregard your budget, but that is one. Two, whether it's a loss of income or your partner's loss of income, I can assure you, you will start breaking some of these rules of thumb that you hold so dearly, right? So yes, enjoy your life while you have very few or none of these instances happening to you. And I hope you're being super disciplined now, because when life happens, you will be forced to break those rules of thumb. A medical emergency, whether it happens to you, someone you love, your mom, your child, anyone, it could happen. Guess what, guys? It could happen to multiple people at the same time.
Mhm,
Like that's life. You
mhm.
know what I mean? So we have to like wake up to that reality. How about this one? A lot of people completely ignore it: getting your identity stolen.
Oh,
There's more cyber crime and identity fraud happening now than ever before. And I can assure you, if you're one of these people who get your wallet stolen,
listen,
and you got a bunch of cash because you're a cash envelope guru, or have your pin code taken and your account frozen because you only use your debit card because you don't, you swore off credit cards.
we have
I
a
guarantee you will change your point of view
yes.
on that and disregard everything that you subscribe to. So there's a reason why people do these things the other way. It does not come some kind of moral failure. It does not mean that they are less disciplined than you. There is a rationale for all of those things.
Yes, we have a neighbor who is going through that right now. She is in an apartment and the apartment that she's in is basically offering units that are similar to hers for a lower price. She's been there 5 years and she now wants to move into, she's like, how is the price lower? And they told her in order to get that lower price, you basically have to reapply. The problem is she had some identity theft issues. And so
Hmm.
her credit is currently frozen. So here's someone who is motivated to try to do something to save money and just can't because her credit is frozen, which means she can't reapply for this lower lease and she's just stuck. And it's easy for you to feel like a failure because you know what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to look at your top three expenses. And if you can get cheaper housing, get it. But at the same time, there are things that are sometimes out of your control, and you can't take that and put it on you as a personality trait. This is just life. And I think that we have to think about budgets as a means to support life as it is versus creating some fairy tale. And that includes following some ratio that you heard from somebody online, even me. Like if it works for me, that don't mean it's going to work for you. I only got one kid
Yeah.
that you might have five or four. That's not going to be the same math.
Yeah, you can be someone who completely writes off crypto because you think it's funny money and you don't think you need to worry about it and you'd rather traditional investments. I completely understand that perspective. I remember a couple of years ago, we wanted to start a business. It did not work out, but we were working with our business partners. We were hiring some contractors who were in Nigeria at the time. Turns out Nigeria was going through some conflicts at the time. And so we couldn't actually pay them using normal standard wire transfer or transactions because they were having internet issues. It was getting shut down. The only way they could actually accept payment was using crypto and using cryptocurrency platforms. And all of a sudden we find ourselves in a situation where we needed to embrace that. You go back to COVID, right? Like a period of time where things were really kind of crazy. You couldn't walk up in no bank. You couldn't do any of that stuff. And so all of that to say, like these rules, these approaches, these beliefs, I think the more important thing is to recognize that whatever you're doing, if it is working and giving you the outcome that you need for the moment in life that you're in, then stick with it. But
Hmm.
there's no need for you to completely write off or disregard any of these other approaches. I think this is a big part of your overall financial literacy. It's not just being a master of the things that you accept, it's understanding the landscape as a whole as it changes over time.
Yes, I think that's so important because there are so many people, again, like treating their budget like it's a wedding vow, and they're afraid or nervous to break up with their budget because that means
Right.
that it's admitting that you failed or that you didn't do it right. But I
Right.
just want to remind you that you're not going to get extra credit for sticking to the wrong budget. There's no gold star for suffering through a plan that doesn't fit your life anymore. In fact, the longer you do it, the more it ruins your motivation to budget at all. And if we can just admit that the advice around budgeting is so dated, I think we can actually move on to a world where we don't treat budgeting as this once a year or once a month exercise, and it's something that you're doing in real time.
Yeah.
I want us to think about budgets the same way that we think about outfits. It's something that you change regularly, and when it stops fitting, you stop wearing it. hopefully. Or maybe that's the wrong metaphor, because I know a lot of
You
people
said the
who
correct answer is it
hold on to
depends.
stuff that don't fit. The point is, if you are spending all of your energy if you're spending all of your energy towards trying to make somebody else's formula work, you're just missing out on an opportunity to create something that is actually working and specific for you. When you think about the nature of work that has changed and jobs aren't stable and income isn't predictable and emergencies don't wait for a budget, they just pop up because of climate issues and all the things that we got going on, you really just can't afford to let your budget be so rigid. You have to get good at adjusting in real time, because your reality is going to keep moving regardless.
Yeah, and we talked about a lot of these kind of disaster situations, and I'm not trying to invite paranoia into your life, but I do think that there's value in being open-minded, right? And what we find is that a lot of people who are particularly strict about their budgets are not that. They are the opposite. They are very narrowly focused. They are not considering or open to any other ideas. What works is the only thing that works for them. Is the only thing they pay attention to. It's the only thing they give credit to. And what we're trying to do is to make sure you understand that a tool belt has tons of different slots, right?
That's right.
And if you got empty slots, that's an opportunity for you to learn something else. You may not be able to use it or apply it at this point in your life, but there's a lot greater value in you at least understanding what they are, what the use case may be, and you have it ready to go so that if those situations happen, or in some cases when those situations happen, you aren't starting from scratch. You already know what to employ, and you can respond to that problem as it comes to your front door.
Yeah. And sometimes you can just pull out your carpenter pants.
Carpenter pants.
You know, the ones with the pocket and the little hook that you can hang your hammer on.
Those were the joints back in the day. I remember them. I didn't
might be putting
recognize
too much dip on the chip of the metaphor.
I didn't know that's what that's what they were called. I forget what we used to call them back in the day.
Cargos?
Nah,
no, cargos have just the pocket.
I think we did call them carpenter pants.
Yeah.
But like y'all would call them overalls, and we call them jumpers.
No.
You didn't know what a jumper was?
Jumpers are for babies.
Yeah, we called them jumpers though, but we didn't call them just like, y'all would call sneakers tennis shoes.
Well,
respectfully unsubscribe from our podcast right now if you call sneakers.
Don't do it. Don't do it. We'll have the civil war up in the comments.
50% of our listeners call sneakers tennis shoes. I'd be like, good Lord.
All right, y'all. Well, hopefully you got a message about budgeting advice. Hopefully, if you are constraining yourself to a cage of a budget, you're open to just exploring something new. It don't have to be an app or anything overhauling your existing process. My mama still keeps a ledger. She keeps every single receipt and writes a ledger in her checkbook, whether it is a debit transaction or not. That's how she maintains her budget, and that's what works for her. So figure out what works for you and let us know what that is. All right, y'all. Well, thank you for listening to another episode of the Rich and Regular podcast. If you like what you heard, you know what to do. Leave a 5-star rating and review on your favorite podcast platform, or drop a comment below. Keep the conversation going. We'd love to hear what works, what doesn't, and we will see y'all next week. If you like videos like this and want to see more, make sure you click subscribe and turn on notifications.